That's the sound of ice crackling deep in the glaciers of the Arctic, rippling out, creating branching lines like tree limbs, extending outward. Those patterns, those sinewy lines, are what appealed to one of the most celebrated wildlife photographers in the world when he was young. He saw them repeat, in his veins, in rocks. Nature, he found, was mimicking him. It's that ability to recognize patterns that makes Paul Nicklin a legend, and it's that eye that got him into his craft as one of the world's leading wildlife photographers and a Rolex Perpetual Planet Initiative partner. He found that there's symmetry everywhere, especially in the ice. Paul spent his earliest days navigating a frozen landscape. The cold became one of his favorite subjects to photograph. But in 2005, on assignment for National Geographic, he fell through that ice. It almost killed him. I'm Alex Honnold, professional rock climber and founder of the Honnold Foundation, bringing you stories of inspiring people who are helping to solve some of today's most pressing conservation issues. In partnership with the Rolex Perpetual Planet Initiative, this is Planet Visionaries.
My name is Paul Nicklin. I'm a conservation photographer, a journalist, an artist, and an explorer. I remember being very upset when my family moved to the Arctic. And all of a sudden, here I am in this cold place, but it very quickly switched for me from sort of concern and worry of this isolation to absolute magic. I fell in love with the Arctic. It worked its way deep into my heart. When you live in a community of 190 people and you're one of 3 non-Inuit families and there's no telephone, no television, no radio, you spend all of your time outside playing under the Aurora Borealis, walking across the sea ice. Growing up on Baffin Island, again, in this tiny community, my mom had the only enlarger in town, and she had a Pentax K1000, and she would get her rolls of Kodachrome 64, and I would just always watch her make these beautiful prints of this life on the ice. And one day when I was 16 years old, we went on a trip together as a family, and she actually let me hold her camera. And then at some point she gave me her camera. And I felt like I was Jacques Cousteau. I was the next great explorer out with this camera. And we came back from the Arctic, moved to Vancouver Island, British Columbia in 1986. And my mom took all of her life's work, all of her slides, all of her originals, put them in a big pile, put gasoline in a fire and just burned them all. Because the life in the North was so hard for her. I'd worked so many years on this assignment. I started in 2002 going up there to do narwhals, and one critical component was to be able to try and find the narwhals from the air and then to try and get aerial photographs of them. And we went flying out and finally there they were at first 5, 10, 20, and then all of a sudden there's 1,000 narwhals. But we went back to camp just to put some more fuel in the airplane so we could go back out and keep doing the shoot. As we're doing that, I stepped through this rotten big chunk of ice. I started to go down. I fall through the sea ice all the time, and it's always a big joke. I don't mind. But this time the ice was rolling, and I was about to get sucked underwater, and I wasn't going to come back because these chunks were rolling inwards like this. And I reached up and I grabbed the rope on my Comatic on my sled, and it dislocated my arm. And finally, one of the guys saw me. They dragged me out. It took them 2 hours to reset my shoulder because it was so frozen. Yeah, pushing your body to the limits to come back with these important stories.
Paul, welcome back to Planet Visionaries.
It's great to be back, Alex. Thanks for having me back.
Tell me what you've been up to the last couple. I guess it's been a year or two since we spoke. So
it's been over a year, I think. I've been on assignment, and we've been shooting for Sea Legacy in Indonesia. We've been doing a ton of diving and a lot of filming, and actually tackling for the first time plastic pollution in Indonesia is a big story. So we're shooting all the beauty, but we're also photographing all the sort of travesties happening to this area, one of the richest marine environments in the world. And that's sort of one of our biggest projects that we're working on right now.
But talk about shooting plastic pollution and shooting those kind of stories, because you've really made a career out of documenting the beauty of nature and sort of the magnificence and the awe and all that. What is it like to capture the other side?
We had been sort of diving all around Indonesia last year, and we were sort of some of the best diving in the world, highest diversity of species and coral and fish, and we're doing these epic dives.
So for anybody listening, I mean, you're married to Christina Meyer, who's also an amazing conservation photographer working in much the same space.
And then Christina and I said, let's just take a break at Christmas and not get involved, not just shut down for 5-6 days and just, sit in a hotel and not do much. And of course, we all grab our phones, we do a little swipe, social media. We find out that 2 miles away, there's a beach. And the storms have come, the rain has come, and it's filled all these rivers in Indonesia, and all this plastic just came flooding into the ocean. So millions of pounds of plastic. And this one beach we went to, Kuta Beach it's called, it had plastic on it that was 6 feet thick in areas, and it was miles long, and there was just more coming in. But it's gut-wrenching to see, and then all of a sudden you see hundreds of volunteers, and we did social media, and we had several hundred people come down and just to clean up this beach, and you see people rallying, you see groups like Sungai Watch, these two brothers and a sister from France moved to Bali, and that's their life's mission, is to rid this country of plastic. So you sort of, at one side you get sort of down, but all of a sudden you get lifted up again, that the people are doing stuff. These are really the heroes on the front line, and so now I'm making a big retrospective book, and I need a book stand, and we're making it out of the recycled plastic. These guys pick up, recycle, and then they start making really high-end furniture with it. So they're employing local people in the communities. Now I'm working with them to make my book stand. So it's really, you sort of look for the silver linings in all these things.
Like what happens at the beach? It's like, oh, you clean up the beach, but there's still more coming down the river. There's still...
God, Alex, it's like I can't even describe to you. You're diving down, and the current starts to pick up during the dive, and sort of like this conveyor belt starts. And at first you see a little piece of plastic go by, and then you start to see thousands of little bits of microplastics, and all of a sudden you see garbage bags, and you see TVs, and you see suitcases going by, and you start to see diapers. At first you think, oh, is that a jellyfish? And then you see a turtle going up to inspect it, thinking it's a jellyfish, but it's a diaper. In the culture there, it's sacrilegious to burn. It's against the will of the gods to burn a diaper, and they have no place to put their trash. So the only place to put all their used diapers is into the rivers. And then they wait for the rains to come, and it flushes all these rivers into the sea. So you have millions and millions of diapers just flowing in the current. There were times that we couldn't even jump off our boat to get into the ocean because of the garbage going by. It was just a sea of plastic. And it's just, you can't believe it. So we're actually going back now to start a major campaign to film all this plastic pollution, and then the efforts to try and fix it.
And I'm sort of shocked.
I was shocked. And I thought I'd seen it all when it comes to garbage and the worst things happening to our planet. And you realize that, there's thousands of tons going into the ocean every second. Like Christina was in Africa on a shoot, and there's this D10 bulldozer, and all it's doing all day long is pushing garbage over the edge of the cliff into the sea. And that's its only job. And they're just pushing all their trash.
What do you feel like is your obligation to share that with the world, or and how do you feel like you can have an impact that way?
Often the power of the people is greater than the people in power. When you can use visual storytelling to galvanize a global audience at one, if you can do it right. And it's hard now because everyone's being throttled on social media, especially when you use climate change, plastic pollution, we're getting throttled. So I think that we just sort of wait for the right moment, and we get everybody together, and we pump that out to the world in a big concerted effort. And that's how we've had a lot of our best conservation wins, like Little Sea Legacy, from Canada, working with a couple of other NGOs, were able to ban the mile-long drift nets off of Los Angeles.
Tell me about that. I mean, what is that?
It was Turtle Island restoration work, and Mercy for Animals were working on this project with Rob Stewart. I don't know if you knew Rob, but a Canadian diver, but a wonderful filmmaker. He had done Sharkwater. He did 2 films in Sharkwater, 2 very successful documentaries on basically the slaughter of sharks. Hundreds of millions of sharks are killed every year. Well, tragically, he was in a diving accident, and he lost his life. And his team came to me and just said, look, Rob's died, and we want to keep his legacy alive. We want to finish this project. Can you get Sea Legacy involved in this? So I said, yeah. So I was sort of thinking about, how are we going to do this to find these boats that are out there fishing all night, releasing these mile-long nets off the coast of LA and San Diego that have a 9-to-1 bycatch ratio. So for every pound of swordfish, they're targeted species, which we shouldn't be eating anyway.
Yeah, I was like, are we even allowed to eat swordfish?
Like they're full of mercury, and then their populations are in trouble. We shouldn't be eating them, but that's what they're legally allowed to catch. But they're catching turtles, dolphins, whales, sea lions, all these other animals are being caught in these nets, things that they're just discarding back into the ocean.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. So, but this is going on. And so we're in Rwanda at Christmas, again, just trying to take a break from all the conservation work. And this guy just says, what do you do? I told him. He goes, oh, that's amazing. I said, what do you do? He goes, oh, I fly fighter jets out of San Diego. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, I'm in the Navy. And I'm like, that's amazing. And he says, is there anything we can do to help? I said, yeah, why don't you start, when you're out there flying around, why don't you look for these boats for us? Sort of half joking. And I'm like, send me intel and data and pictures on where these boats are. He goes, yeah, well, when we're out running our night ops, we'll start sending you some, what's your text number? So he's, I give him my number and he's like, so is this the boat you're looking for? And I'm like, that's them. Those are the fishermen. And so then we worked with these other groups. They put an observer on one of the boats the guy went undercover and we did this big campaign and we had it banned. But you just see what it takes to have a conservation win. It takes this key inflection moment. You need to have a strategic strike. You got to bring everyone. The visuals have to be gut-wrenching and powerful to the point that, it was,
it has to be obvious.
Yeah, and it was 9 out of 10 votes voted in favor of banning it because it was so shocking and so awful to see. So we need to do the same thing with plastic when we take this on.
Do you think that's possible?
You think awful visuals are going to win by themselves. You have to work with the governments and policy. It really gets the public's attention on it. So there's a lot of pressure there. But at that same time, you've got to be doing the policy work behind the background. You have to be working with the decision makers to try and have these wins. So it's never a quick thing to have a conservation win. It's a long, slow burn.
How did you go from wildlife biologist, basically like living on the ice? Living in Baffin Island, which is the very end of the world.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you get to this kind of global conservation?
I grew up with the Inuit, learning how to tell stories from the Inuit, learning about art and storytelling. I was so obsessed with capturing visually the beauty of this place growing up in the north, and then knew that I was going to do something someday that had to do with protecting it. And the only obvious thing seemed to become a biologist. And so I got a job as a biologist, and then I started working on species like polar bears, wolverine, lynx. And it was incredibly important work. But I realized as a biologist, we were just managing how many animals can you kill before you drive the population down. And we got it wrong every time. It's just saying we were managing the Bathurst caribou herd, which had 480,000 animals in it when we did our census. Now they're still fighting over who gets to kill the last 5,000. So there's been a 99.5% crash in that population. And there's still public pressure to keep hunting these animals. So I became very disillusioned, very disgruntled, very frustrated. And I needed to clear my mind. So I had a Cessna 206 fly me from Inuvik and drop me off on the Horton River in the middle of nowhere where I wasn't going to see anybody else for 3 months. And I just sat there on the barren lands with the wolves and the bears and just sort of figured out, this isn't for me. I thought it was my path. What's my path? And I thought if I could just bridge the gap between the science, because the science was important, and the public by doing stories for a magazine like National Geographic, then I might have real and lasting impact when you can reach 100 million people with an article. So then I got into National Geographic. It took a long time. It was a long road, but I got in there and I started shooting stories. I was doing their climate change stories, species at risk stories, doing stories on narwhals, and then behavior pieces on leopard seals. And, it was great. It's like being in the NFL, but there's only one team, so you just like, it gets really exciting. But it was slow. Like, you would do a story for a year or two and it would come out for a month and then be gone for an ever. And then you're already on to your next assignment and that there was nobody there to sort of clean up the pieces behind you and have conservation wins. And then I met this remarkable woman by the name of Christina Mittermeier. I don't know if you've met her, but she was running this thing called International League of Conservation Photographers, and she was really using photographers as storytellers in their own journey, and we had a big fight one day. I'm like, I am a journalist. I'm a National Geographic journalist. I do unbiased. She goes, no, you're not. You're a conservationist. You care about this too much. You care about these animals. You care about these ecosystems. You can do a biased coverage and still be, a good human. So, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I got really sort of enamored with what she was doing and the way she was speaking so passionately about all of this. And at that time, my social media started to grow, thanks to National Geographic. At first I had a couple 100,000. And then one day I did a post on the Nat Geo feed saying, hey, if you want to see what narwhals look like, go to my feed. And I got, I think, 50,000 new followers in an hour. And I'm like, okay, this is real. So there was this way that we started to think about storytelling, and that really changed the way we started to, instead of think about the big story, we started to think about the daily beat of these stories and sort of beating that drum daily. And that's when 2014, 2015, we decided to launch Sea Legacy. And then, by 2017, I really started to just go into the conservation voice. And then we started to have conservation wins. And I'm like, okay, taking a great picture, seeing your picture on the cover of National Geographic is amazing, but nothing tastes as good as a conservation win.
So have you seen that strategy be more effective? Storytelling it's almost like direct to consumer.
Yeah.
Do you find that's more effective?
Yes, it is more effective, but it's waned in a sense. I mean, it was actually the starving polar bear that we put up. I don't know if you saw that. We put up this short little video of the starving bear, and Christina took a picture of it that was in Time magazine. And, we released that going into Christmas. And it was just kind of like, hey, we didn't even say this is climate change. We just said, this is what a starving bear looks like. It's not just as polar bears disappear, if they're slated to disappear in the next 100 years as a species, they're not data points falling off a sheet of paper. It's actually really awful to watch a bear die and starve. And we put that up, and I think it got 2 billion views. It got a quarter of the planet apparently saw it.
When I suppose ultimately, though, the measure of success is conservation wins. Like, are polar bears any better off now than they were 10 years ago? Or like, are these ecosystems doing any better now than? And so by that metric, I mean, how do you feel like the work is faring?
I did a story for National Geographic in 2000 and on climate change. I went through the whole Northwest Passage, and I couldn't get a scientist to go on the record and say climate change is a result of human activity. And, but nowadays, I think everybody's talking about it. You see change happening. It's just happening too slow. So it's a terrifying time, but also change is happening.
Of your sort of advocacy work between lecturing, photos, even scientific work as a biologist back in the day, of the things you do that are sort of useful, which of those do you actually like doing the most? Like which actually fuels you?
I never thought I would say this.
I'm just kind of curious.
No, yeah, I love, and it was also a kind of a fluke in 2011 doing my TED Talk. I was not ready for it. I was going through a divorce. I was, flustered, and I hadn't prepared. But to have everybody coming up to you after saying, how do I get involved? How do I support you? How do we help this planet? All of a sudden it's like, wow, this is a great way to communicate. And so I've gone on to do probably, 400 or 500 lectures in the last 20 years. You're giving a lot of energy, but now you have a lot of energy coming in from those moments where you feel really energized. I mean, you've done incredible talks as well, and TED Talks, and you
not incredible ones, but I have given talks.
Okay, but were you energized from it?
No, I feel like completely depleted from that stuff.
Okay,
my TED Talk was like the most traumatic thing I've done in a way. I was like so gripped and so nervous, and it was so hard.
Harder than your hardest climb. You were just
by far.
Okay,
yeah, it was
and
terrible.
You probably had prepared.
Yeah, I had prepared, much more so than you. I mean, I memorized my whole talk like I was supposed to. I still forgot part of it when I delivered it, but I did my best.
The best part about my TED Talk is what really got people was at the end of my talk, I forgot my conclusion, and I had no idea how I was going to come out of my talk. I was like, oh no. So I put my head down like this as I went into my conclusion, just to think for a second. Everybody thinks I'm crying. And all of a sudden I hear these collective gasps of crying in the audience because people think I'm crying. And so like they're crying. And so then I actually did get a little teary-eyed. And then I looked up and I didn't know what to say. So I invited all these people to Antarctica. So now I think my talk's been seen by a few million people, and I still get emails today like, I accept your free invitation to Antarctica. It's like, no, I didn't know what to say. But yeah, but it was a blessing to be disorganized and not ready and not prepared and not too static. I mean, obviously the part I love the most is gathering the visuals. I love to be underwater for 5 hours on my rebreather, shooting work that's really important. Even like I was just photographing in Indonesia, TV sets and shopping carts.
Do you really see a TV set go past you in the ocean?
Not floating, like rolling on the bottom. It wasn't like floating, but it's just rolling on the bottom. Like every bit of trash goes into the ocean. There's no garbage dump. Everything that you could think in your life that you've ever thrown away, you would just put into the ocean. So you just can't, it's just hard.
I mean, it's hard for me to, like, it's honestly hard for me to believe that, like hard to grasp. I'm like, really, you just watch
these are
everything.
karst limestone islands that don't have a place to really dig and put stuff. Like we brought our boat into this marina and they said, can we offload our trash here? We had a few bags of garbage from being at sea for so long. And they said, yes. And so there's a big dumpster there and we put our trash all in the dumpster and we're like, okay, like anywhere else in the world that would go away and get dealt with. Well, we saw the garbage truck come by, pick it up, drive down a mile to the end of the road and dump it all at the edge of the ocean. And then all the locals come through and pick whatever they want from the people's trash. And then the rest of it goes into the sea. And we're like, okay, well, we can't. So we had to figure out ways to carry our trash everywhere.
I'm like, that's so crazy.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's interesting though, because it also makes you remember that the trash in general, even in the developed world, I mean, it's still only getting buried. It's not like anything is really happening with it. Landfills, it's like you're still just digging a big hole and just putting your trash there for a long time, but it's not like it's actually being dealt with.
A lot of like our equipment that we buy, it's got 5 layers of plastic around it, and it's just too easy for these companies it's so cheap to produce it. So it's just something we've got to tackle at that level for sure.
I mean, to some extent, you can drive markets, as individuals, as groups. But yeah, ultimately, that's a policy thing. And I mean, I suppose that's why you're so interested in speaking to groups and like presenting your work more widely. It's like you just have to organize big groups of people to make.
Yeah. I think when you say what's the best, I mean, you really, whether you love it or not, you need all of it. I've hired somebody specifically just to run my account every day because it's one of the many tools. Like, I'm doing this podcast with you because, I mean, obviously I'm a massive fan of yours and I'm grateful to do this, but I want the microphone. This microphone to talk about these issues is just one more tiny little cog in the wheel of reaching the world about the issues you care about. So Instagram, lectures, podcasts, books, like everything you can. Like Rolex has been a great partner for us. Where not only do they support the work we're doing, but they help give us a bigger microphone through their channels, through their PR agencies, where they say, hey, we're sending CNN out to your boat in Mexico on your big project there to talk about conservation. That's a microphone. Katie Couric comes out on our boat, which is, I've always been a fan of hers, but like this is a microphone opportunity to use her channels. And now we write articles for her organization called It's a Ripple Effect. It's a monthly column that we have. It's like it's almost like an anti-anxiety antidote device where you have to just keep beating this drum across every channel you have just because it makes you feel like you're doing something, and you are doing something, but it's never big enough or fast enough.
We're here in New York at Climate Week, and so we've both been doing tons of events around Climate Week. And so I was speaking at an event last night, and people were sort of asking sort of doom and gloom questions around climate change and sort of general ecological health. And I was like, yes, it is very depressing when you look backward. But I was like, if you just landed on Earth right now and you looked at the state of the natural world, you would still be filled with wonder and awe. I mean, the world is still magnificent. It's still beautiful. It's like the oceans are still incredible. They're still full of life.
Yeah.
They have less life than 50 years ago, let's say.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you just dropped in right now and established a baseline, you'd be like, this world is incredible and we live in this paradise.
Yeah.
And you would think that moving forward, you still have this incredible opportunity to preserve that life and to protect the natural places that remain. And I was like, in some ways, I think the environmental movement does itself a little bit of a disservice by looking backward too much.
100%. Like it's funny you say all that. My mind's just racing as you're saying this because it's a great answer to what to your own question is I sometimes get really down. I'm like, I wish I could have been here to walk with woolly mammoths. I wish I could have seen saber-toothed cat.
You're a nice person.
Yeah,
you grew up in Bath.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, I want to see a woolly mammoth. I'm like, I don't need to see a woolly mammoth.
I was diving in a cave in Mexico. We're 200 feet deep, and it's called Hoyo Negro. And they found this 13,000-year-old girl's skull in there. They found Gomphothecus elephants. They found 25 grizzly bears that are over 20,000 years old. And you're like. And my mind starts to go, I wish I could have been here to see this life. But of course, you wouldn't because, you wouldn't have all the modern tools that we have at our disposal.
It's a much less comfortable life.
Yeah,
for
much
sure.
as animals are all trying to eat you.
Yeah.
So and then I'm sitting there having this thought in Africa, and I'm like, and then all of a sudden I'm standing next to Craig the elephant, who's 52 years old and 12,000 pounds. And I'm from me to you to him because he's so gentle around people. And I'm like, no. There's so much beauty in the world right now. Like you're absolutely right that if your mind goes to what was, yeah, it's depressing. When we've lost 70% of biodiversity on this planet in the last 50 years, it gets pretty depressing. But then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. And that's why I'm launching this new book I'm doing called Reverence, to revere what we have here and now. It doesn't get any more beautiful. Like, I don't know if you're religious or not, but like to me, to think that I'm going to live my life and thrash this planet and then go off to some place where they're going to open up these gates for me and it's going to be pure bliss. It's like when you spend time immersed in nature, you're swimming next to a blue whale or a pod of narwhals, or you have a polar bear walk by you on the sea ice, or you're hanging onto a cliff looking out over a valley. You're like, it doesn't get any more beautiful. Like you can't imagine, you could not ever stop to imagine, I don't think, a place that is more beautiful and fragile and raw and powerful as what we have in front of us right now. And yeah, it's what keeps me going every day to fight to protect it.
Yeah, talk about Reverence. Talk about the new book.
It's just how I feel. It's how I feel. It's how I revere nature and animals as these these other nations. And when you look at these other cultures of sea wolves and spirit bears, like a polar bear walking through the Great Bear Rainforest, underneath these 200-foot tall red cedar trees with the ravens calling and 50,000 salmon in a river. And then, you're up in the Arctic on the sea ice and there's, 1,000 narwhals going by, and then orcas, and then a bowhead whale that's over 200 years old, swimming by, the oldest living mammal on Earth. And it's just, I have such deep love and passion and reverence for nature. And, I don't have to sell guys like you hard on it because you live it. You're out immersed in nature all the time. And maybe often you're facing a rock wall, but
I do turn and look behind me sometimes.
And, and probably one of the best parts of your climb is just getting to the top and sitting there and giving gratitude and thanks for this world. And
looking around the landscape.
Yeah.
And that's always part of it.
That's always part of it. And for me, that's just it. When I'm underwater on my rebreather with no bubbles and it's silent and you've got 10 manta rays, swirl. I was just underwater and the current was flowing and I'm alone and all these manta rays were there, and all of a sudden this large pelagic manta ray that's probably 16 feet in diameter wide comes up and parks itself next to me, and I look and it's covered in fishing line, and it just sort of sits there next to me, and I'm gonna cut the line off it and shove it into my wetsuit, and just, I don't know, you just can't believe that there's something this beautiful. So the amount of reverence that I feel, and it's the secret ingredient, as Christina says, to really saving life on planet Earth right now is just hope and reverence. We have to find hope. We have to realize the beauty that's in front of us. People have to realize that, we've become such digital creatures and our world is this far in front of us, and then we're on our computer and then our TV, and then but when you sort of get past all that and you look outwards and you look out into the world, you go, oh my God, this really is incredible beauty. When you're diving under the waves, or you're climbing on a mountain, or you're sailing across the sea, or you're just sitting in the forest, or sitting on a beach, or going for a hike, to go, wow, I can't believe what we have is still this beautiful and powerful, and just trying to get people to wake up to it. I really encourage everyone to get involved in whatever project it is, because if you sit there at home and if you're scrolling on social media and you look at the doom and gloom of our planet, you get dark really quick, and it just sinks you deeper and deeper. But all of a sudden get involved and say, well, I'm going to go help my local dog shelter. I'm going to go help, my kid can go to school. I work with kids and they're like, yeah, I made a stand and now we have zero plastic in our school. I'm like, that's amazing. And they feel good about themselves. Now they want to get more involved in other projects. And
this is the classic think global, act local.
Yeah.
Because ultimately acting locally is the thing that allows you to have an impact, like start at whatever scale you can and
your
work
solar work that you do. I mean, that's got to feel amazing, but like if you take on, well, climate change, what's the point? It's like, well, no, this is a place I love, culture I love, people I love. I'm just going to go do what I can to help raise money and help here. And like Christina and I went to Africa and last year, I'm like, I got to get away from the plastic pollution. I just want to go sit with elephants and not get involved in any conservation work right now. I can't handle it. I just need to. And also, boom, first day, a guy walks up, I know who you guys are, and your Sea Legacy. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I'm working with Saving the Survivors. I go and make prosthetic limbs for rhinos that have been poached and help them. He goes, can you? I'm like, how do we help? And then all of a sudden, first day we're back in, and then the next day we're with Riteti and the Sorara Foundation, where they have 1 million acres, and these guys they're basically taking orphaned elephants and they're now working with the local Samburus to take goat milk, which is much better than cow milk, better for the environment, better for everything. And now they have like a 99% success rate in releasing these baby elephants back into the wild. So like, how do we help? Like, can I write a check? Can I use my social media? And all of a sudden by the end of sort of plastic depression, I'm feeling pretty good about life. And now we're working with the Segera, and then we're on to bringing 20 rhinos back into this habitat that used to be devastated by cattle. And now they've, I took off in his ultralight airplane in his airplane with him, and we're looking at 400 elephants and 300 Cape buffalo. And this was just decimated years ago, and now it's coming back. So you just got to find these local projects of hope and inspiration that really can get you going again.
Yeah, this is exactly what you're saying, that if you're feeling down, act.
Yeah.
It's like you guys.
That's what I meant to say, Alex. Thank you for saying it so succinctly.
Yeah. Though honestly, as you were saying all that, I was like, maybe if you guys want to go on vacation, you should go rock climbing instead. You just don't go to conservation areas if you're trying to escape. I was like, you go somewhere with fewer people and just like some rock walls, and
I have to say,
relaxing.
I was in Air Cadets because I wanted to be a pilot, and I was colorblind, so they kicked me out of the airplane, the flight
Are
program.
you colorblind?
Yeah, believe it or not.
You take all those pictures and you can't see them?
But I don't do post. I don't do my post. My world is consistent. Like I can see you're wearing a
Really?
pink shirt, and that's so
wearing
my,
a pink shirt.
Yeah, so my world's consistent. But
That's true? You don't do your post-production?
No.
'Cause you don't see colors?
I might play with a bit of contrast, but I
That's
don't.
crazy. How do I not know that? That's crazy.
I know. I'm like 1 in 12 men are colorblind.
It's like, who's the famous composer's deaf? Is that Mozart, Chopin,
Mozart, yeah.
Bach? One of those guys
Yeah.
couldn't hear or lost his hearing.
Yeah, so I'm kind of that guy.
That's why you like the ice world so much, because it's just black and white.
It's all
Yeah.
white.
Yeah, you grew up in black and white. You didn't even know you were colorblind.
Well, the
until
funny
you came
thing
to
is,
the city.
in the snow, you get all this algae that's red, and everybody always talks about it. I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see reds.
But you see it as grays.
You
see it as dark snow.
browns and grays and stuff like that. So then I did anyways, my point is they kicked me out of flight school. So they sent me off to Outward Bound. And I have to say, I mean, I'm not a rock climber, but it was one of the most profound, beautiful things I've done is just you and the rock, being out there hiking in the mountains, being up at 8,000 feet is just, I love it. So
I love it too.
yeah, I get that. So I get you guys.
Paul, thank you so much for taking the time and chatting on Planet Visionaries again. Thanks so much for joining us.
I really appreciate it. Thanks, Alex.
Planet Visionaries is a podcast in partnership with the Rolex Perpetual Planet Initiative and a Sony Music Podcast production.